So we come to the message, Psalm 63. I'm getting really into the Psalms. I've, for quite a long time now, you look at the Psalms and realise that there are several different writers, several different authors. But we have, whoever's writing any particular psalm, we have a wonderful insight into their relationship with God. And we have all kinds of reactions depending upon the writer's mood. We have the whole range of human emotions, sometimes fearful, sometimes hopeful. But it's all here. A tremendous inspiration. I'm beginning to realise the significance and the importance of the Psalms. But now we come to Psalm 63. In my Bible, I have the title, A Psalm of David, when he was in the desert of Judah. Well, for David, he must have had a sense of deja vu, how would we pronounce it? Because he'd been here before, hadn't he? Think about David's life. He had a whole, for a young man, he had a whole wealth of experience. I know it's pre-Jesus, but God promised to all of us the fullness of life. Would we ever wish for a life full of all sorts of things, persecution and danger? Because when he was in the desert before, he was being chased by Saul. Poor unfortunate David. He'd been blessed by God. But from Saul's point of view, I mean, the Bible tells us initially that David was of handsome appearance and fine features. Well, that was one thing. You've got a good-looking young man who, everything that he touched turned to gold. He couldn't lose. And for Saul, who was at least feeling a little bit peeved, well, for Saul, I can imagine David must have been one of those people you feel like slapping. He was just so... You're with me there, aren't you? It's not just me that's met those people. But Saul wanted a whole lot more than that, than just to slap him. He was after his blood. But we're back here in Psalm 63. David in the desert. This time, he's being chased by his son Absalom. So he's in the desert. He's in trouble. He's in need. From his son. This time it's his son after his blood. Absalom was a nasty piece of work. He'd already killed his brother, and now he had designs on the kingdom. He'd been working carefully in the background, gaining people's attention, gaining their ear, gaining their support, and now he wanted the kingdom. And he was after David with the army of Israel. There was tremendous support that Absalom had raised. So David was fleeing again and seeking sanctuary in the desert, fearing for his life. A large number of people after him, the army, accomplished people. They knew all about search and destroy. And they had a powerful leader, probably fearful of him. They were determined to succeed. They were determined to come back with David's head. So he was cunning, powerful, and growing in power. So you might have thought that David might have needed lots of things. He certainly needed food and water. He needed shelter. Whilst David wasn't entirely alone, he could certainly do with a few more friends. He could certainly do with safety and reassurance. That's from an outsider's point of view. But what, from David's point of view, does he think he needs? Well, David's decided on God. His heart set on it. Verse 1. Earnestly I seek you. You are my God. I thirst for you, my whole being. His heart set on it. He's tired and thirsty, obviously. But these are not top of the list. So are his priorities wrong? We know that the desert's hot in the day and cold at night. He needs a good meal. He needs to build his strength up. He's really in need. Even in a good night's sleep. Now that's always good advice, isn't it? Have you got a problem? Sleep on it. You'll feel better in the morning. But no, his physical needs were not a priority. They were not at the top of his list. He decided on God. And verse 1 shows the depth of his feeling. He desired God to the depth of his being. God was on his heart. Why? Because he'd met him. It says so here. He'd met him in the sanctuary. And just to pause here, that's a good reason to come to church, isn't it? I know that God's not restricted to churches or temples, but if you're looking for God, this is a good place to start. So if David had met God in the sanctuary, that might have been a number of places. As a young man, he probably went to synagogue, and we know that he was blessed by God. He had knowledge of God at a young age. During his grander life in the courts of Solomon, he probably He probably went to the temple in Jerusalem. He certainly met God there, in the sanctuary. But I think it's just as likely he was meeting with God in the desert. That's surely part of God's creation, and surely a place where he'd see God's might and his power. In that desolation, you can see God, you can meet with God, and see his power and his glory. So David had felt his power. He'd seen God at work. He'd seen him in the temple, in the desert. David had seen God in his life. That was his personal experience. He knows it to be true. He knows it within his heart, within his mind. He knows that God is everything. Verse 3. Because your love is better than life. Better than life. He's tasted and seen that the Lord is good. And his response is praise. Day and night. God on his heart. Another Bible passage comes to mind. Pray to God. Give thanks. Oh, it says pray continually. 1 Thessalonians, you'll remember. Pray continually, it says, which is what David was doing. Give thanks in all circumstances. His life's in danger. He's physically tired, hungry, nowhere else to turn. He's used to the comforts of the palace, the comforts of servants. Yet here he is in the desert, praising God. Verse 6, on my bed I remember you. Day and night, David is thinking about God. Amazing. He had met God in many places, and that's why he could see him in the desert. Verse 7, he's protected. It talks about being protected under his wings. Now, the first thing that might come to mind is like a mother chick, mother hen protects her chicks. That's always a good illustration. We can understand that, the maternal protection. I think there's an element of that there, certainly. But I think David is also under the protection of heavenly wings. We read in the Bible that there are legions of angels up there, winged beings. Their wings, they encompass the world. They're certainly sufficient to keep David safe. He's under heavenly wings. What a powerful protection that is. So David has a sure and certain hope. And it must have been that during the less pressured times of his life, when he wasn't under threat, when he wasn't being chased, that he learned about God's goodness, about God's love, God's promises and his provision. During the less pressured times of his life, he read God's word, took them to his heart, believed them, and they were proved to be right, to be trustworthy and true. Now he's got God on his heart, always, and in every situation, in every place geographically. So he says in verse 8, my soul clings to you. He's not going to let go. He's going to follow the real power, not any pretender to the throne like Absalom. And verse 9 and 10. Those who want to kill me will be destroyed. They will go down to the depths of the earth. They will be given to the sword and become food for jackal. He knows what's going to happen. And that story is told in 2 Samuel 18. When Absalom catches up with David, Absalom and his armies, they are slaughtered because David too has his supporters and his fighting men. David already knew the outcome. Those who were after him would be given over to the sword and become food for jackals. So David's need was for God. What are our needs? Probably many things. It's true that we're not being pursued, we're not in mortal danger, but we can feel persecuted in many ways. Some people are persecuted by debt, and if you're pursued by the tax man, there's no more relentless pursuer. But it's not always persecution. We have pressures in our life which are every bit as real to us, every bit as effective as those dangers that were facing David. Pressures are real, whether they're great or small. So what's our response under our pressures? Where's our refuge? The Bible says, lift your eyes to the hill, and we can go beyond that and lift our eyes to the heavens. Find God in his sanctuary, here and out there. Seek ye first the kingdom. That was what David did. In his hunger, in his tiredness, God would sort out all the rest. That's the thing about what David learned. He was open to meet with God, not just learning lessons, not just learning the scriptures. He experienced God and knew it to be true. That when God spoke to him, seek me first, all the rest will follow. Lift your eyes to the hills. David obeyed that. He knew it, he felt it in his heart. That's a good lesson for us to learn as well. Our refuge. There's one who can protect us, sustain, and free us from all sorts of dangers. Whatever seeks to destroy us in itself will be destroyed. This psalm is a wonderful testimony to that. Whatever is against us has got no chance. But we have every chance because the shepherd will protect his flock. Our Father will protect his children. Our King is the conqueror because we are sheltered under his wings. In all our trials, he remains King and worthy of worship and thanksgiving. So we must pray and praise him without ceasing, day and night, just as David showed us the way. We've read the NIV version of the message of the psalm. I turned to the message for the same psalm, and just a slightly different use of the language brings a fresh breath of life to it. So just listen to the message, Psalm 63. God, you're my God. I can't get enough of you. I've worked up such hunger and thirst for God, travelling across dry and weary deserts. So here I am in the place of worship, eyes open, drinking in your strength and your glory. In your generous love, I am really living at last. My lips bring praises like fountains. I bless you every time I take a breath. My arms wave like banners of praise to you. I eat my fill of prime rib and gravy. I smack my lips. It's time to shout praises. If I'm sleepless at midnight, I spend the hours in grateful reflection because you've always stood up for me. I'm free to run and play. I hold on to you for dear life, and you hold me steady as a post. Those who are out to get me are marked for doom, marked for death, bound for hell. They'll die violent deaths. Jackals will tear them limb from limb. But the king is glad in God. His true friends spread the joy, while small-minded gossips are gagged for good. Real exuberance in there. So what's good for David is good practice for us. And even if the worst happens, revert to the psalm, we have something better than life. So, if we have something better than life, the worst cannot happen. There is no worst. What we need is God on our heart, always. Amen. Can we stand and sing our final hymn?